Providing a dose of rationality, critical thinking, and skepticism from a conservative atheist perspective, this is the Bitchspot Report podcast. Every week, your host will bring you news of note and commentary on topics of interest in hopes of sparking intelligent discussion on important issues of the day. It's not pretty, it's probably not safe for work, but we tell it like it is and offer no quarter to the credulous, the gullible, or the downright stupid. It's not for the easily offended, or for the religiously or liberally minded, but it is about 90 minutes of secular conservative entertainment. So let's get right to the show. Here we come to save the day. After taking a week off, we're back for another 90 minutes of religious and political absurdity, evaluating the ridiculous under the harsh light of reality and reason. This week, gays intimidate people who believe in God. The Catholics are being held accountable for sex abuse. The Supreme Court rules on online threats. A family gets arrested for disturbing the peace, bringing up free speech concerns. Plus, we talk about religion and the force employed by a lot of churches to get people to empty their wallets. That's what we've got to talk about, so here we go. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. We have now moving into the summer quickly, so it's melting lead out there, but there's plenty. The summer's always good for crazy.
Yeah, well, it's always good for crazy no matter what time, but I guess when it's really hot, the crazies go outside.
But, and we do have a fair amount of crazy. I'm just, wow.
Yeah, well, I do want to apologize for having no show last week. My oldest daughter graduated from high school on Wednesday when we usually record, and I knew that if we were going to do a show, we'd have to do it really early because we had to be sitting on our seats by the time we normally record, but it got to be really obvious it just wasn't going to work. She had to be at school by 7:30 a.m. for practice, and we had people coming in from out of town, and it was just a mess. So there was no way I was going to have time to record it, much less edit it, so I just kind of made an executive decision that we'd skip a week, and that's kind of what happened. We try not to do that, but hey, sometimes shit just happens.
Life intervenes.
Life intervenes, and
if any of you have younger children out there, one day you too shall enjoy the joy of sitting, listening to a very, very long, very, very boring commencement speech.
Oh yeah, no, we sat in those seats for about 6 freaking hours. It was awful. And she's got 525 people in her graduating class. So we're just sitting here and they're like double timing these kids in 2 lines. It's just like they've got like 6 people up there reading names off and they're just running as fast as they can, getting their little plastic holders because they don't actually get their diplomas, which I always think is stupid because when I graduated from high school, I actually got my diploma, but I guess I was kind of alone because nobody else ever seems to.
I don't know why they do that. In some cases, they just don't want to have to deal with, is somebody not getting their diploma yet because they got to complete some classes over the summer. I think in another case, they just figure it's much less likely to get your diploma accidentally destroyed, or maybe we're going with the cheapest printers possible, so they say they'll have it by graduation, but everybody knows they'll have it by the middle of summer.
Well, no, I mean, it actually says in the guide, the little pamphlet thing that you get, it was like, let me actually grab it so I can actually read what it says. I have it in my hands here, and it says, the listing of a candidate's name in the commencement program is presumptive evidence of graduation, but is not regarded as conclusive, meaning some of these people aren't really graduating.
Yeah, I mean, in part, I think it's because, and in some cases you may not know if you're going to graduate until graduation, at least in the schools I taught at, graduation actually happened before teachers would turn in their final grades for that last semester. So if you have somebody who's trying to complete a course, you're not going to know if they're graduating until sometime later.
Yeah, well, I mean, I personally think if you're at the point where, and let's face it, you've already finished all your classes, and if you're failing, then you shouldn't be up there walking. That should be a reward for actually finishing. It shouldn't be something that you get just so that you feel good.
Yeah, I mean, there's different points to speak on it. I mean, I think one of the problems, of course, is that, like I said, at least, I mean, I know, for instance, at the college level, nobody had any of their final grades in before the graduation. I know because I was grading some of those papers.
Yeah, I think that's kind of stupid though. It's like, get your ass on the ball. Come on. It's not like for the entire week before they graduated, they did nothing. Nothing. Everybody, every class, they sat around and watched movies while the tax money rolled in. It's like, guys, if you're not going to teach them anything, don't have them be at school. Don't have the teachers there. Fuck you people. If you're not going to earn your money, you shouldn't get your money.
Well, it's, for some of the last, unfortunately one of the problems is the last week of school for most kids, you're not going to do anything to help you graduate if you've already not graduated. If you are graduating, there's really nothing else to be done. I mean, short of, I know some schools would generally try to put a really important test like, the Wednesday before graduation, but I always consider that a little bit of a jackass stunt on the part of the school. If they've done their work throughout the year, if they're ready to graduate, at least give them a little break in the last week because, for a lot of them, this will probably be the last time they see their friends. Because, God, I can't think of anybody I know from my high school days now.
Oh, I mean, I still know some people, but let's be honest. Anybody that I wanted to keep in contact from high school, I did. And if I didn't, there's a reason for that. It's because I didn't want to see those people anymore.
Well, it'd be interesting, but she has graduated, and that's one down, one to go.
Yep. Another 2 years for that, and then I'm just done. Yay.
You'll miss the joy.
No, I will not.
Homework.
No, I will not. I won't miss it at all.
Besides, if I ever become a principal to school, you'll have to come to my thing. I'll set off fireworks.
No, you won't.
Why not?
Because they won't let you.
I didn't say I was going to be principal much after the graduation.
Well, that's kind of stupid.
But I just, I'm sorry. Sometimes I'm just certain that some principals just desperately, even if it would cost them their jobs, just want to speak truth. Mention, yes, you're graduating. Congratulations. Go to college now. Honestly, in a great respect, this high school diploma is not going to help you get a good job.
Yeah, but they never tell you that. They always go, oh yeah, you're going off on a great adventure. It's like, no, this was the best of your life and it's going to suck from here on out. Get used to it.
Principal Eeyore? I'm sorry. Didn't mean to depress you. Yeah, I mean, that's probably a sign of a person who's been working in the field a little too long. But, so, speaking of crazy.
Yeah, we should probably go do the news, because there's a lot of craziness out there this week, and, oh my God. Yeah, we say that.
Crazy is strong in Arkansas.
We say that every week, and it's like, it never goes away, and it never gets any better. It just keeps getting crazier. All right, let's do the news.
And now the news.
It's all about you, right? At least according to Arkansas lawmaker Jason Rappert, who wrote on his Facebook page that the local gay pride parade in his hometown of Conway, Arkansas was scheduled on Sunday because it's just trying to upset Christians. He said it was designed specifically to intimidate people who believe in God. Well, maybe it was just scheduled on that day because that's the day most people have off work. Maybe it was scheduled on that day because it's the one least likely to cause traffic problems and impact local businesses. But no, it's all about Christianity and it's just one big gay conspiracy to make them all feel bad. Well, maybe they should.
Well, I mean, it gets to the fact that intimidating, it's not an offensive display against Christians, I'll point out, for one thing, because there's a number of Christian churches that currently do accept the idea of gay marriage. So what he's actually saying, it's not simply it's offensive against his specific brand of Christianity, which is a brand of Christianity that the world would be far better without.
Yeah, but this is just another case where they're convinced that everybody's out to get them and that everything happens that they don't like because everybody hates them. It's all about them. These people are absurdly self-centered and egotistical. Seriously, guys, fuck you.
And to be honest, a lot of these people, you're in a situation where many of these people, they define against them as not doing whatever we want.
Oh, of course, of course. And apparently this gay pride parade, it doesn't offend many people in this community or they wouldn't have had it for the past decade. It only offends this dude. And he really has no clue. I mean, he says that the Supreme Court should not force 96.2% of Americans to accept gay marriage. But let's be honest, the latest polls show the majority of Americans, by a considerable margin, support gay marriage legalization. I mean, it's like you shouldn't let the Supreme Court force 87.8% of the population to stop keeping blacks as slaves because they're only 12.2% of the population. Fuck you, dude.
Yeah, and that's another important factor is that these people have not yet gotten to the point is that if a right is a right, it is not dependent on hitting a certain level of population. If you have a right, you have, that right is given, regardless if you're 1 or 1,000,000.
And let's be really honest, and we've established this long ago, I mean, going back to Skokie, that, you just don't have a right not to be offended. These people can march as long as they get the proper licenses and the proper permits and all the rest of that stuff. They are absolutely legally able to march whether you like it or not. The Nazis could come marching down your street. Anybody could come marching down your street, and you just don't have to like it. If you don't like it, don't watch. It's really, really simple. But again, these people, it's all about them and their feelings, and everybody's out to get them, and anything that they don't like, well, it's an attack on their religion, and I don't get these people. I just don't.
Yeah, well, one of the things is that if I look at this, and you brought up the Nazis, I mean, it's important to note, one of our big free speech cases, Skokie, Illinois. And that was a case where you could honestly say, yeah, people have a good reason to be offended because this was a neo-Nazi movement marching right through a community where many Holocaust survivors are living. If you're a graduate of Auschwitz, class of 1945, you have a far greater reason to be disturbed by somebody waving the Nazi flag around than this guy does. And yet the court once again said, sorry, speech is free.
Yeah, but they don't want free speech. They only want free speech when it's their speech. They don't want free speech when it's somebody saying something that they don't like.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of, unfortunately, it's kind of like we have a story like this almost every week because there's such a sense of entitlement that, we should be free to talk, but everybody else should be suppressed. It's another reason why guys give thanks to, God, the spaghetti monster, the spirit of reason, that America is a secular country because religion does not play well with others.
Well, I think that's actually one of the reasons these people are up in arms, because they're terrified of having a secular country. I mean, they can't handle the idea that, holy crap, our religion isn't in charge anymore. We don't get to make all the rules and have everybody bow down and, let us do what we want to do while stopping everybody that opposes us from doing what they want to do. These people just don't have a grasp on modern reality.
No, they don't, and they would be perfectly happy to live in Saudi Arabia. I mean, again, the important thing to note is these people are very much in the same camp as ISIS, very much in the same camp as the Saudi morality police. It is just that they happen to believe in something different from what this group believes in. But the methods used, if they could suppress the parade, or, let's be honest, less pleasantly suppress people who were gay, as in, either arresting, driving them out, or sending them to these, re-education camps, they would. They don't, because we send people to jail for that.
Yeah, and this is one thing, and I know I'm going to go right off topic here, but that's what we do.
Oh, we've never gone off topic.
No, well, it's kind of related, but I don't understand society today where you got the people on the far right like this who just say, hey, if we're offended, if we don't like it, then we get to control what everybody else does. But you've also got people on the far left who are doing the same thing. And we talked about this off the air a while back. That the one case of that girl in college who wanted to ban a bunch of comic books from a college because, holy shit, they offended her, and therefore she wanted to control what everybody on the college campus had access to. What's wrong with, what is wrong with our society today?
Well, I mean, most people, let's be honest. On the one hand, 99%, I would say probably, 90%, probably more people don't care. They may disagree or agree with it privately. They'll just go and do their own thing. The problem, of course, is today is that it's easy to get publicity. The internet is a lovely platform. It's done a lot of good, but equally it makes it very easy for this crazy to come up. And because the crazy is so unusual and people talk about it, you start thinking that, okay, that's the default. When in reality, I would say honestly, it's not. This guy, even in this guy's own town, let's be honest, even in this guy's own town, it sounds pretty much like, he's out there all by himself. In fact, I would bet to say a good chunk of the people who are going to church on Sunday are more of the line of, Yeah, there's a gay pride parade. Okay, well, we better remember not to park, we're going to have to, think of a different place to park when we go out to eat after church. And that's probably the end of their thoughts about the entire process. But these groups, they make a lot of noise, they scream and they yell, and, just again, for any of our viewers, readers who are not, listeners, who are not in America, Arkansas is not the United. When you're talking about an Arkansas representative, it is entirely possible that this guy got voted in because people really liked his smile, and he was the local Little League coach that their kids love.
Yeah, he's probably not. He's got to be supported by a lot of people, but maybe after doing this kind of crap, he's not going to find himself in office anymore.
Yeah. And also, of course, there's the factor that with American politics, he may still find himself in office if it turns out that, the stuff that people consider important, like, tax regulations, port to the city, if he can deliver that, he still may be ported, because honestly, there are a lot of districts where people just tolerate the guy screaming like an angry bull moose because they find out he fairly effectively gets stuff done that benefits them. It's always hard to tell with these little. And Arkansas is a little district. I will bet you that the number of people voting in that election were smaller than live in Corona.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, there's hardly, I don't know. This kind of stuff, it just kind of pisses me off. And let's be honest, this guy, he probably has views that are pretty similar to a lot of people in the area that he lives. I mean, we're talking about Arkansas, It's backward city, but
equally,
these are people that are supposed to be educated. I mean, probably not the people who are voting for him, but you'd hope that the people that they're sending to Washington at least have an education. And he doesn't, and he's an idiot.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I will say one thing. I mean, evidently, since this is the first time we've heard about it, and the Pride Parade's been going on for 12 years, I would say one of the reasons these people talk about this more and more is that these viewpoints are increasingly in the minority. I mean, gay marriage exists in a lot of America. The states did not suddenly dissolve into Sodom and Gomorrah, followed by God hitting them with an orbital strike. Surprise, surprise, when gay marriage was legalized in most states, the only ones who really noticed the difference was, hey, wedding shops made a little more money. A few people filed as married couples on their tax returns. So these groups are running into the problem is that, as usual, they're wrong. I don't know his position on interracial marriage, but I've always struck by the fact that, when Loving versus Virginia came along, you had people screaming that this was going to lead to the utter destruction of America, and they turned out to be wrong, and they're going to be wrong about this, and I think they're not dealing with it well because, how many times can you be wrong before people start saying maybe we shouldn't listen to you anymore?
Well, nobody is listening to them. That's what's happening to religion in America.
And I cannot honestly, be surprised. I think that religion in America probably would have done better if they had stuck to good works, but they didn't. They wanted to get involved in the political arena, and hey, you end up on the wrong side of history, people start noticing.
Yeah, well, hopefully when they notice, they're just gonna walk away and say, we're done with this crap. We just can't take this anymore. Keep your fingers crossed. All right, you want to...
Okay, this is interesting. This is potentially a big-time issue. The Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis has now been charged criminally with criminal charges against the Archdiocese for failing to protect children from an abusive priest. This marks the first time that an Archdiocese, as an organization, has been faced criminal charges. Many of them have faced lawsuits in civil court, but this represents a sudden major shift, especially if other jurisdictions take account of this. The reason for this is that what they're arguing is that the Archdiocese had a duty to protect. They failed that duty, and they failed that duty in the presence of overwhelming evidence that there was something wrong. In other words, this isn't a case, and some people have already tried to say, how can you blame them? This isn't a case where the priest, drives off to Las Vegas, has his way with somebody, comes back, nobody knows. This is a case where they're arguing the Archdiocese should have known, should have reported it to police, should have taken immediate action to protect children. And, if anyone's been keeping up with this, there's been numerous stories where a priest has been accused of sexual molestation, and the Archdiocese response is to just move him to another church, usually without informing anybody of the reason for the move. So this represents a major shift in how these groups are going to be handled, because criminal charges are a far different beast than civil charges. So, it is actually very impressive. And, honestly, if you look at the history of systemic abuse within the Catholic Church, and it's a fairly ugly one, and it's been proven, I would say, beyond a shadow of a doubt in many cases. I think that these charges are deserved. They have had decades to clean up this mess.
Yeah, but they don't care. And, I mean, as you said, this isn't the first time that the courts have found that religious higher-ups in the Catholic Church were liable, mostly civilly, but, now we're starting to see criminal charges. The archdiocese in Cincinnati, Philadelphia, Kansas City, they've all been found either as a group or as individuals within the group to be guilty of failing to protect children, of failing to enforce the law, etc. But it hasn't changed anything, has it?
Well, no. I mean, one of the problems is, and that's why you're looking at these criminal charges, is that you can't change a culture of abuse by just cutting individuals loose from it, because it's a culture of abuse. It's the same thing you'll get, like, if you see, that's why, for instance, a lot of businesses will often fire an entire department. I mean, if a bad culture gets rooted in there, you've kind of got to do slash and burn. And the Catholic Church has really been resisting that. They've always been saying, okay, well, this priest, he's just an outlier. Nobody knew, et cetera, batshit bullshit. And what is increasingly happening is that various jurisdictions are saying, no, you should have known. There was abundant proof here. We have in your own records that you are transferring this person due to accusations. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you have accusations, you don't transfer a person. You report those accusations to law enforcement, and you keep him the hell away from other kids.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we need to end this absurd religious exemption for criminal behavior. Honestly, I want to see priests and religious leaders be made mandated reporters where they have no choice but to report any and all cases of sexual abuse that they become aware of. I want to see an end to this ridiculous lackadaisical reporting because of religion. Nobody else gets this exemption. Why the hell does religion get it?
Well, a mandated reporter would be interesting, especially when you consider, well, for one thing, when you consider the position of the religious authorities in many people's life. I mean, they have an almost unique ability to take advantage of people because of this, social religious position they have over them. I don't know if there's been moves to try to make them mandated reporters. Obviously, for instance, a priest who was serving as a teacher would be a mandated reporter, as would any teachers around him.
Yeah, but I mean, the fact is that the only position of any kind in America today where if you become aware of a crime, and I would be fine saying, let's just make it sexual crimes. Any other position, psychologists, teachers, anybody would be required to go and report this to the police. The only people who absolutely have no obligation, and in fact they have an obligation not to ever open their mouths to anybody about anything, no matter what they find out, are priests, are ministers. That should go away.
I don't believe that's illegal. I mean, I know in cases where priests have gone to prison on contempt charges for failure to break the seal of the confessional. So I don't think that's a de jure shield they have. It's just more or less de facto that prosecutors generally don't want to risk the backlash.
Fuck the backlash.
Yeah, well, I mean, and of course it goes both ways. And there was a case of a person that tried to use a confessional to get him off. But it does bring into question of, for one thing, when we're looking at this, I mean, to go off a little bit is, sad to say, the Catholic Church is fundamentally unhealthy because demanding, celibacy. Because, yes, you have had examples of abuse in other religions, but for instance, the Episcopalian Church, otherwise known where Catholic priests go when they want to get married, does not have anything like that because you're not forcing people to make a choice that is honestly inhuman. When you look at this, and, many priests are entirely, a young man who wants to serve his community, and you're demanding that you give up the right to, have a family, engage in sexual congress, anything like that. Presuming that person is at all like most people, that's a hell of a sacrifice that just doesn't work with human psychology. And, this isn't the Middle Ages. This is, the reason this was created in the Middle Ages was to keep bishops from deeding their diocese to their children. we don't have that anymore. The last I heard, the Archdiocese of Cincinnati did not have its own army and was not preparing to, grant the diocese to the child of the Archbishop, who would then go off to the Holy Land to do war with King Richard the Lionhearted. So really what the Catholic Church needs to do, if you want to cut this out of cut the root out of this, is simply say it's okay to get married.
Yeah, but that's never going to happen.
Yep.
I mean, these people need to go to jail, and this goes all the way to the top. If Pope Francis gave a shit, which, let's be honest, he doesn't, he'd be excommunicating all these people and having them on the curb by morning, whether charges were pending or not. Just saying, hey, this person is being accused, significantly and seriously by a number of different people that they sexually abused. It would be, dude, pack your fucking bags, you're out. But he doesn't do that. He doesn't care.
Well, even if he has the power. I mean, you gotta remember, the Pope doesn't have nearly as much power as people
well,
describe.
but yeah, he could.
But
he should be saying a lot. And let's be honest, the Catholic Church, he doesn't have as much power as he wishes he had. He said awful lot of things that later on other people have come along and said, oh yeah, don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the problem, of course, here is that, whatever happens with Pope Francis, I mean, obviously he's not under U.S. jurisdiction. What I'm interested in is that we're looking at these dioceses, most of which are financially independent from actually the Vatican. They have their own structure. Many of them are organized as 503c nonprofit organizations. There's a lot of money there. And what you start doing is, if they become popular, is you can start saying, we're going to go after you both civilly and criminally. And what I wonder is, are we ever going to see a RICO prosecution?
I'd like to. It would make sense to do it, but unfortunately religion enjoys way too much power in the U.S., where you've got an awful lot of people, an awful lot of politicians who would never, ever, ever do that, because they know if they did, they'd never see re-election.
Right, and of course RICO requires that you really prove the entire organ. RICO requires even more, proof than just saying they should have known and they didn't. But still, I mean, just this move here, if this spreads, we may finally start seeing some honest to God real progress. And, in all seriousness, whether or not you believe in Christianity, whether or not you are religious, this was still a shameful and unconscionable betrayal of people who depended on and believed in.
Yeah, but you don't think these people care? The Catholic Church doesn't give a shit.
I mean, but, what needs to happen, and, for one thing, what needs to happen is, as you said, make it very plain that a priest is just as subordinate civil and criminal codes as anybody else. And the organization they work in is required, if they have evidence, to go to the police. I mean, because honestly, that's what schools don't have their quote own investigation when they think a teacher is engaging in, sexual molestation of a child. They run right the hell to the local police department and say, hey, yeah, we've got that, because the local police department and the local district attorney, they're the ones who are set up to do these investigations.
Well, yeah, but they actually care about investigating. The schools don't have any vested interest in covering it up, because, it's not like they're sitting around going, hey, if somebody finds out the weird shit that's going on in this classroom, well, we're just not going to get them throwing money in our collection plate on Sunday, are we?
Yeah, and this is also, America should be fortunate in a way, because, to be honest, the Catholic Church has been involved in a lot of really horrible shit. If you look at some of the Irish orphanages, there's been some stories in there. In fact, that's one of the reasons why Ireland, which, was almost synonymous with the Catholic Church for many years, is starting to become increasingly secular, because so much just, gut-churning horrible stuff has been coming to light. And it's, and to be honest, I have no problem with people who wish to worship. I have a great deal of problem with people who wish to worship and be somehow exempt from the laws everybody else is.
Right, which is exactly why I said we need to make these people mandated reporters. And even if you don't make the individual priests mandated reporters, because,
you can still make
the people who are not actually day-to-day priests, who are not hearing everyday confessions from just regular Joes off the street, but anybody else, anybody up higher in the organizations, absolutely take it out of their hands. Don't make it optional. Say you are required by law, like it or not, and if you don't do it, your ass is going to be in fucking prison for years.
And, I would also point out that, when people say the seal of the confessional, well, the fact of the matter is that a traditional part of absolution in any confession is to submit yourself to the secular authorities. So, and if someone doesn't, you're not playing your part. I mean, but seriously, you can make the people around them. This is not, again, some deep, dark secret. In many cases, we're finding out these are the case of everybody knew this fellow, well, you probably shouldn't leave him alone with your son. And if that's becoming open knowledge, you're obviously working to conceal it and not report it, and that just should not be allowed. I mean, if you find somebody abusing a child, or if you think they're abusing a child, you need to report it to the authorities.
Yeah, but these people think they're special. They think that they have nothing to do with the secular authority because their power comes from a higher source. Or what the hell? What commercial was that? It was like a butter commercial.
That was the Franks, the kosher Franks. Which I always thought were fairly clever, but yeah, I mean, and this is a case where the government, or at least, the DA is starting to say exactly that. Look, here's the thing. We are going to show you that you don't want to push us on. It's going to cost a lot.
And it should.
And yeah, and I hope it goes well. So we'll have to look into this and see what happens in the next couple of probably months to see what happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just hoping that, and I keep saying that, and I know that change is slow, but holy crap, I mean, how many decades have we known about this serious problem inside the Catholic Church? How many times have we have to say, everybody knew that this guy was out molesting kids, and they just kept moving him around and around and around and didn't tell anybody, and the guy gets off scot-free because nobody wants to testify against him and all this other crap. How long until this changes? How long until the culture of religious exceptionalism and exceptions from the law, how long until that just goes away and we just don't have to deal with it anymore?
I would say probably longer than we think. I mean, let's face it. One problem here is that you also have the similar thing going on with cases of family sex. People often don't want to talk about it. It's probably not going to go away until you can actually sit there and understand, the people even going to church understand that, no, we are abused. We have the right to talk about it. And people are still working on that with family abuse, so probably a long time.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is, because seriously, people should not be suffering, at the hands of, someone they trust. But we don't live in a perfect world, sadly. But we can make it more perfect.
Hopefully.
And that means by cutting these people no slack.
Well, that's what we really need to do. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the next one. And I brought this up specifically because there's so many claims of threats of violence that we see coming from the lunatic left on a regular basis, where people are screaming and crying that somebody said something mean about them, and therefore they ought to call the FBI and get that person arrested. The Supreme Court, however, has ruled that threats, particularly online, only count if there's actually some reasonable expectation that the individual has both the means and the intent to actually carry them out. And of course the leftists they're against the whole thing, including the Obama administration, because they want their ability to cry wolf, and it's convenient for them to do so. But why does this kind of crap just keep happening? I don't get it.
Well, because, right now, part of the reason is, at least with the law, is that we're in a situation where we have this, huge internet that's occurred. And it's blowing up literally overnight. As far as the law is concerned, the internet has blown up overnight because, even 5 or 10 years ago, it was still, pretty much the domain of geeks, but now just about everybody, I can't think of anyone I know that doesn't have access to it, that doesn't have a Facebook page, So all of a sudden, the internet's become this, second sphere of speech next to, verbal speech, next to, printed speech, and it shares characteristics of both, and so there's still going to be a little bit of confusion. In this case, what happened is you had a man, and let's start out with a simple fact. People like to think in a free speech case you're going to be defending George Washington, a man standing for the right of people to speak unafraid. No, usually free speech cases you're defending an asshole. And this guy was an asshole. Let's get that out right then and there. He put out stuff that he obviously knew was going to cause issues for other people. He's a jackass. But speech protects being a jackass.
Yeah, it's not the speech that you agree with that matters. It's defending the speech you don't agree with that makes a difference.
And in this case, the question that was asked, and this is actually a fairly narrow case. I mean, and that's important to note because again, this is a new type of speech. So you're seeing lots of narrow cases while the court's trying to kind of feel their way around it. In fact, two of the courts, the two conservative courts, Alito and Thomas, they had separate opinions because they said that, if we're arguing that you have to articulate a threat, the court really left nothing behind. The court kind of said, okay, this doesn't qualify as a threat. It doesn't rise to the actual threat standard. Didn't really leave much guidance to what does. Because the court said that, negligence, in other words, the idea that, hey, you should have known this would have been read as a threat, was not sufficient for conviction. They required, an actual feeling as did he intend.
Well, yeah, because there's a lot of people out there that no matter what you say to them, they're going to say they take it as a threat. These people have so little backbone, it's ridiculous. I mean, just this week, all right, in a discussion about threats with a liberal, that guy claimed that just because I said that police need to take threats of violence seriously, that I was threatening him with police violence. I mean, these people are that fucking stupid.
Yeah, you have that. And another problem is that when you look at these, determining threats on the internet, I mean, let's face it, one of the problems when you're trying to evaluate a threat is that if I walked up to this woman and I told her that, as Elonis did in his lyrics, if I said, hey, you're my wife, your protective order's not thick enough to stop a bullet, it is very likely that the court would have ruled, yeah, because of my proximity to her, because of the nature of the threat, that would probably cover as a threat. But he didn't. He said it on the internet. And this gets into another problem with the internet, is that being that ability is a part of this, is that in a lot of cases we have people making threats, I'm going to totally murder you from my parents' basement 600 miles
and I don't even know where your house is. I don't know who you are.
And I don't even know where you live, and if I manage to waddle my way up my stairs without my heart exploding, I'm going to try to find a gun, which I've never used outside of Call of Duty. I mean, seriously, that's another issue you have when trying to evaluate internet threats, is so many of them are, obviously just hyperbole. And the court's looking at that because, some jurisdictions try to treat internet threats like they would treat written threats. Others say, no, we're going to look at them more like, an off-the-cuff statement made in speech. And there's generally different standards at. Intent is always going to be a wiggy thing. I mean, the court really doesn't like a lot of intent-based tests because obviously Elonis is going to say, no, I was just doing my thing as a rapper and an artist. You're never going, you might get someone stupid enough to walk into a court and say, oh yeah, that was totally a threat. I really hope that she feared for her life. But most people, whether or not they meant it as a threat, are going to say, oh, it totally isn't. And this is kind of the case where the court has to deal with the fact that if you want to protect freedom of speech, you've got to admit people are going to game the system. People are going to try to not to jump over that line, even though they intend people to threaten, because this isn't a perfect world and we don't have.
Yeah, but I mean, still, that gets back to the idea of I don't know why so many Americans have no backbone at all. I mean, why so many people are so totally unable to stand up for themselves and their ideas. They think everybody's out to get them. I mean, we've turned our kids into a generation of wimps who can't fight their own battles. We've turned our college students into people who need trigger warnings because they feel bad. What the fuck is wrong with these people where they think everything that happens in their lives, everything that they disagree with, everything that doesn't go their way is suddenly a threat that they need to be protected from?
Well, I mean, in some reviews, a part of it I think is not understanding, because a lot of people are not used to being threatened, and the internet does tend to lead to people making really graphic threats. I mean, cyberbullying.
Well, no. All right, everybody is used to being threatened. All right, everybody was a kid once. Kids do shit like that. All right, kids make all kinds of really ridiculous threats. I'm gonna beat you up. I'm gonna steal your lunch money, whatever. All right, we all survived that. But now, nowadays, if anybody says that to your kid, these people shit their pants. It's like, guys, kids, that you need to go through this kind of crap so you grow up to be an adult with a backbone. And we don't allow that to happen anymore.
Well, I mean, part of the problem is, I know a fair number of kids who this isn't really an issue to. When you get to the adult level, like I said, I think a lot of it is people not realizing just how many people on the internet say stuff because they see it as speech. And again, you're talking about the 600 miles away from you, threatening you. They're totally going to murder you with their katana because they were totally, a killer death commando in their own mind. But, it's going to take time for the culture to catch up with that. And also, on this case with Alonis, let's note something. He's in prison right now. He hit his girlfriend's mother in the head, or allegedly did, violated his supervised release. He's back in there in trial, and he could still be facing problems in this case, because the court didn't dismiss the case. The court sent it back to the lower court saying, you have to apply the knowing threat standard. So it is entirely possible the jury's going to look at him and say, we don't believe that you were just saying that as an artist. You were totally intending that as a threat. So this case hasn't yet been resolved completely. It's going to now have to be decided in the way that the Supreme Court has said it must be decided. He also, I'm not certain, but he could probably also face a civil suit, although I doubt he has anything worth suing him for.
Still,
So it's going to go back down, and they're going to have to decide, okay, was this a knowing threat? Did he intend her to actually be afraid for her life with a threat? And, in this case, I have a feeling hitting his girlfriend's mother in the head is not going to play out well for him because, when you say that to the jury's going to start thinking, well, okay, this isn't a case of a person who's never been violent in his life just spouting off online. This is a case of a guy who has obviously proven willing to hit people.
Sure, and he deserves to go to jail for that.
Yeah. Again, let's just get, once again, the problem is that free speech cases are almost, like most civil rights cases, honestly, are generally decided when there's a jackass sitting in the defendant.
Yeah, but jackasses have rights too, let's be honest.
Jackass, this gets to one thing I always get annoyed at because, one of our favorite bad guys in Hollywood is the slimy defense attorney, who is obviously defending a man who is completely guilty because the writer of the episode has shown us with him working at his freshly squeezed kitten juice factory. Guys, defense attorneys, without them, the system doesn't work. And you may think a defense attorney is slimy, but wait until the day when you didn't realize you're not supposed to talk to the cop, you were in the wrong place, your car looked a little bit too much like the guy that just shot up a liquor store, and now you're sitting in the seat and you will have an entirely different view of the idea of a defense attorney who's going to go to the mat for you. Because the state is sure as hell going to do everything.
Yeah, but let's be honest, there's plenty of slimy defense attorneys out there who will defend people that they absolutely know for an absolute 100% fact are guilty, but they're going to do anything for the money.
Well, in general, and that's one of the things, because you're not allowed, if you're a defense attorney, you are not allowed to stop a criminal defense attorney. Let me rephrase. It is very difficult for a criminal defense attorney to stop representing his client. And this is one of the problems. A lot of defense attorneys, criminal defense attorneys, they can be put in a real bind if a client is obviously guilty. They generally must report it if he's planning to commit an actual crime. Like he says, you don't need to worry about the witness, boss. He's going to be dead by next week. But even if they report it, it can still put them in a bind depending on the laws that govern lawyers in their area. Now, I've been told by lawyers that there's a good way to find out if a lawyer knows that his client's guilty. And it's, if the client gets on the, if a client gets on the witness stand and starts telling his own story, and you see the defense attorney just kind of looking off and not asking questions, that's pretty much about as obvious a sign as you get that he knows he's guilty, because he knows his client is going to perjure himself and he's not going to help the client perjure himself. It can be because some of my friends have been on both sides, both prosecution and defense, and it can get really messy if a fellow is guilty. And in a lot of cases, that's why he's plea bargains, because if he says he admits guilty, what the defense attorney is supposed to do then is say, okay, you're going to be guilty, but let's try to get you, the best possible deal.
Yeah, well, unless they have a lot of money, at which point in time they're going to do everything they can to get him off because it makes them more money.
That does happen, and let's face it, one of the best ways to not get put in prison is to be wealthy, which I find rather.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we have a legal system, and I don't want to get into all this stuff because we've talked about it many times in the past. But
we'll go off
I'm really getting, I really wish I had a legal system that was more concerned with guilt and innocence. Actually, you are guilty or you are innocent, and less with two lawyers fighting to the death, regardless of guilt or innocence.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's probably a subject for a different podcast, because how wealth applies to people being wealthy or not wealthy.
Well, let's be honest. The more money you have, the bigger liars you can hire.
well, yeah, and also you can do a lot more stuff to get people off. You can hire a lot more professional witnesses. Because I mean, one of my friends who's a public defender, he has like 60 cases a month. And we're not talking 60 misdemeanor cases. We're talking 60 felony cases a month. So it's very hard to get, no matter how conscientious your lawyer is, it's hard to see you getting good help on 60 if you want 60 felony cases. But so let us I'm going to say something. I have been in graduations where people got a bit too excited. Some of them have been asked to leave. I've never been in a graduation where someone was slapped with a court fine and possible arrest. This is another example, I hate to say it, of a small town, surprise, surprise, in the South, where it looks like we've kind of, weaponized or monetized our various penalties. Seriously, the law is supposed to be used for meaningful purposes. I mean, the state has the right to send men with guns to your house. They have the right to arrest you. They should not exercise that right for things like cheering too loudly at a graduation. I mean, hell, one graduation I was in, someone came tearing across the stage bare-ass naked. They just got told, ha, very funny, get out of our graduation.
I do too. And now I just went through a graduation ceremony and they told everybody you're not supposed to cheer for the individual students, and every single person in the place did anyhow, and nobody called the police. This is a free speech issue. What these people did was not against any law on the books. It doesn't matter what the school might have wanted people to do. They've got no legal standing whatsoever for forcing them to fucking do it.
Yeah, and it's a case of, it's excessive use of the law. There is none of the stories I've seen on this have said that they cheered so loud or so long they made the,
but it doesn't matter. That's the thing. They could have done anything. They could have been out there with fucking bullhorns, and there's nothing the school could have done because nothing they did at all was illegal. Now, if it was a private property, then yes, they could have been ejected from the graduation, but that's not what happened. They pretty much said, fuck you, we're going to impose legal penalties on you that don't actually exist within the law.
Right. I mean, I think, and this is another problem because one of the deals here, again, it gets into a lot of these small towns, and this is one reason why you have such a bad relationship in some of these places, is it's probably more about the $500 fine. I mean, think about what's happening to the town's budget. Some people shouted, you're getting $500 a head for them. And, this is one of the cases where the expansion of the number of laws is, seeing an increasing problem with people's relationship with police, because if the police officer is just increasingly seen as a guy who collects taxes for the community, nobody loves taxmen. And more importantly, if the police officer is doing this, is serving these frankly bullshit kinds of fines and summons on people, he's not exactly out there doing his job, which is to protect and serve.
Yeah.
And this is a case where, for a lot of reasons, both free speech and both limited government, this should go away. And to be honest, I don't really like charges of disturbing peace. Disturbing the peace is this wonderful catch-all thing that basically means whatever the hell the prosecutor and the cop wants to be. I mean, it's another case where you don't have much in the way of, objective standards of what counts as disruptive peace. And, to be honest, depending on the place, you might have the authority to say, because the courts have said in the past, even in a public meeting, if people are disruptive, you do have the authority.
Which they could have done.
Which they could have done. And by doing so, you solve the entire problem. The people leave, the disruption is over, there is no need to bring what could actually turn into, some time in the county jail. I mean, this is just a case of such an overwhelming overreaction that it is, I would like to say it's funny, except...
Yeah, but I'm sure these people really couldn't care less. And at my daughter's graduation, there were people there, and yeah, I think it went way over the top, who had the stupid little air-powered air horns. And yeah, there were people in the back going, wee, wee, wee. Nobody dragged them out. Nobody tried to arrest them. Yeah, right. It was probably going over the top, but nobody was a dick about it. And
Right, and because this happens once, I mean, for a lot of people, this is the last time they're going to graduate. You know, some will go on to college, some won't. Some, because they're going to be adults and, you know, going into the military or moving across the country, it may be the last time, even if they do graduate from college, that their whole family and friends will be there. It's one day, it's important to a lot of people, cut them some damn slack. You know, in all seriousness, this is a case where the school really needs to kind of reassess, because I do not really think that you're ever going to get it where everybody's sitting there dead silent like they're at a funeral, the name is announced, and then you can hear the person's footsteps because everybody's
right. I mean, and that's
so dead silent.
Seriously, that's what they want, but they know that's not what they get. This is just another case of hyper-authoritarianism, where it's just, we want to tell you what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and we have the power to force it on you. Well, fuck you. No, you don't.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that something happens with this. I mean, this, you know, now this is kind of the good point of the internet, is because before the internet, we never would have heard about this. You know, we honestly never would have heard about events like this, because they probably never would have made it to the mass media. The internet lets us
Plus
hear
the
about
fact
this
it allows the national media to get on this. It lets people who are above these little assholes go, you know, you're making us look really, really, really bad, and maybe you shouldn't keep your job because you're being an ass.
Yeah, you know, and hopefully this will be changed, and they'll change that, because, like I said, I don't like the idea of people feeling you're just free to risk throwing people in jail, because again, you know, guys, we need to remember is that if you can't pay this, men with guns come to your house to take you to prison. You know, that's really important point to remember, is that when you involve the legal system like this, you're dealing with men with guns. And we've all heard stories about how even in normal events, you know, bringing men with guns to your house can go very, very poorly. So it's something that the government really needs to start dialing back, especially these small governments, and saying less is more.
Well, plus the fact with the internet, let's be honest, if anything really did happen here, there's an awful lot of places out there like GoFundMe, etc., where a lot of people are just going to come together and say, you know, we're going to give a couple bucks and we're going to pay your fine for you. Or you can probably get a whole bunch of lawyers out there going, you know, this would be a really nice pro bono case for me, so you can sue the school district because the school district can't say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has a chance of going both ways, where it can make them look bad, and it also can get a lot of grassroots support where we can just stomp on these people and make sure this doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll see that happen, because I would like to.
Yeah, well, I would too, but
go away.
Hey, we get to talk about it, and people who listen get to think about it, and hopefully get to respond to it. I'd really like to hear what people have to say about this, because I think it's just absolutely ridiculous.
And, you know, also another thing, remember if you hear about this in your own town, write letters, make comments. The more people talk, the more
and send emails. It's really easy.
Send email. You know, send emails, or if you can, write an actual copy letter, because since email sending is so easy, a lot of times they consider a written letter more important. But in all seriousness, especially if this is happening at your local town level, I mean, we've always brought up the fact that some of these crazies are elected by only a few thousand people, maybe only a few hundred people, or more than the other guy. In that case, if you're a politician who has a voting, you know, if your electorate is no more than 10,000 people, and 100 people or 200 people start sending in letters saying they don't like that, you'll listen to that, because 100 or 200 people is actually enough to shift an election in these areas. And that's important. And in fact, that's something that everybody, whatever your political leaning is, remember, you start local. Local, you don't want to, if you try to start from the top, you'll fail every time.
Yeah, you start going to the school and you start talking to them, then you start talking to their bosses, the local board of education, etc. You start talking to the mayor, you start talking to these people and say, this is just wholly unacceptable. And, you know, if you're not going to get on board with this, well, maybe you're not going to be sitting in that seat next year.
Right. You know, you're the mayor, you're the school board, you're the ones who can make policy. We don't like this policy. You know, change this
and
policy.
A lot of these people, I think, really do forget that they work for the people, because let's be really honest, and especially this is true when you get higher up, but special interests pay for a lot of this stuff, but the people still are the ones casting the ballots. You'd think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. And, oh wow. So, And from small scams to big scams, it seems we're going.
Yep. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do some main event.
This is the main event.
Now, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the religious claim that they're much more charitable and caring and loving, that they give far more money than atheists do. But the reality is, while it might be true that lots of theists give lots of money to their churches, it's not necessarily a voluntary thing. And I found this story where a pastor of a church was telling his parishioners to keep giving money over and over and over because God said so. Dig deep, give till it hurts, empty your pockets, give us your rings and your jewelry because some imaginary man in the sky orders it. Is it really charity when people are giving under duress, under the threat of making someone who supposedly has the power over heaven and hell to hold it over to your head? And I say, hell no.
Well, I'm looking at this. I see that our good friend Crefo Dollar's been mentioned. I have to admit, my old priest at my Episcopalian churches wishes that he had this kind of power over people. But.
Well, yeah, I mean, he wanted his congregation to give him a $65 million airplane after his old airplane suffered damage in a rough landing near London. And since then, he's been flying commercial, and I guess God doesn't like that or something.
Oh, commercials, terrible.
Well, I mean, it's sad.
The devil flies.
It's sad when you realize that more than 200,000 people have promised to give him more than $300 each to achieve his dream.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a case of, the problem is that when you have these things going on, as the writer here says, a lot of these rituals violate the New Testament. They actually do, they actually do violate a lot of long-standing traditions that you're not supposed to pay as kind of a pay-to-play style organization. They're saying that they're going to give you recognition. They're saying that you need to do this for that. And one of the problems is that this does move against a lot of the traditional Protestant views, especially when you start seeing that it almost seems like the church organization is a chance to get you in so they can get money out of it for no other reason.
Well, that's all they really care about. I mean, I think it's funny how many churches will sit around and go, oh, well, the Bible says give all your money away. Well, yeah, but you're not doing it, are you?
Right.
And we can go back to like Oral Roberts, who in 1987 told his flock that if he didn't raise $8 million by March, God would call him home. And everybody was giving money because they didn't want to see him drop dead. Well, holy shit, I would be going, hey, this is a good opportunity to see if God's real. Let's not give this fucker anything.
Yeah, and of course, you could argue that violates, you'll not put the Lord your God to the test. You're sure as hell putting the Lord your God to your test. You're saying, hey, give me $800 and he won't call me home. And you also get to the problem is that the early church, because often they do bring up the early church, but the early church sold everything. The early church was communist or collectivist, if you want to go into that view. And I don't see much of that happening in modern churches. I don't see much of the idea that everybody's going to sell everything they have and it's all going to be, in this big collection plate that's distributed as people need it. That's not happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not going to see people living in a religious commune. Okay, yeah, if you've got a cult, if it's Jim Jones up there, yeah, you're probably going to do that. But otherwise, everybody's got their own life, and the idea of, even the idea of giving 10% is ridiculous for most people. But you're not seeing all of these big name televangelists out there going, hey, I'm giving all my money to the poor too, so we're all in this together. And I don't know how people don't see through this. Why do so many people give money, especially money they can't afford, to these shyster religious organizations? You've got little old ladies sending their social security checks to Benny Hinn so they can eat cat food and Benny Hinn can live in this multi-million-dollar mansion. What the fuck?
Right, and that's another viewpoint because the early church, there is no way of reading the early church that says that living in a mansion is at all, Christian in the way it's viewed in the New Testament. I could see, a church leader having a modest home. Because in modern society, you don't really want someone being homeless. But that's far different than what we have. We have these empires being built, and these empires being built on people who are desperately sending money in because they're told if they give money, God will love them and they'll go to heaven.
Yeah, going back to my old church, all right, and I'm not holding that up as anything wonderful, but the pastor of that church, he lived on church grounds. There was a house there that he lived in. That was part of his compensation for being the pastor. He had no, his car. He didn't own his car. The church owned the car. He got use of the car while he was pastor. He didn't get this huge salary that he could go out and live in riches and everything. The only problem with him is he didn't know what birth control was, and I think they had like 8 kids or something stupid. But otherwise, he didn't have a lot. His job was leading the church, and all the money that the church got went into maintaining the church. There's so many churches out there that are just dripping in gold, and the pastors are driving Ferraris and all this other shit, and nobody calls them on it.
Right. And I mean, let's be plain. We're not saying that a pastor should live, I see no reason for the pastor of a large church that should not enjoy a wage commensurate, say, with a middle class, individual. But that's the point. Middle class. A wage commensurate with the wage enjoyed by the membership of his flock. But in this case, we have this extortion and people who are using it as a money-making organization. It's a way to make money.
And they're making money under threat. They're threatening.
Right.
And I mean, they're not holding a gun to people's heads, but they're holding the religious version. They're saying, if you don't give me all your money, God's gonna be very angry with you, and he might send you to hell. And yeah, that sounds really stupid to people who are going, Jesus, you people are a bunch of morons for believing this crap in the first place. But these people take this seriously.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate because often these people are older people, more vulnerable people, because let's face it, older people living alone are extremely vulnerable to scams of every type. That's why there's so many old people scams out there. And also the problem is that they are smart. There was a fellow back in the 70s who was selling prayer hankies.
Oh yes.
I forget. I think he got zinged mainly because they found out he wasn't praying over the hankies. But fundamentally, no court's going to ever say that I got swindled because, good things didn't happen. That's just not what the courts are doing. So it's a really easy scam if you want to do that. And of course, in this article, we're seeing that, legitimate, believers in some cases have started getting rid of the collection plate and surprise, surprise, finding out that they actually are making the same amount or even more because people are no longer being held hostage.
Yeah, well, you got to remember a lot of these groups, and I'm trying to remember who it was who did the prayer hanky thing. And to be honest, we actually pointed this out a while back that it wasn't so much that he wasn't praying over it that should have gotten him in trouble. It was the fact that he was actually making promises about what these prayer hankies were going to do for you. He was promising that good things were going to happen, and then when it didn't happen, well, he's basically just lying to people. And this mostly happens with like the prosperity gospel idiots, who are all out there going, give us all your money and something good will happen to you. And when nothing ever happens, well, just give us some more money because you haven't given us enough money yet. And I don't understand how people put up with that kind of crap either. I mean, these people are just so utterly deluded and lied to. I don't know why the U.S. Department of Justice isn't out going after these people, but, religion gets a pass.
Yeah, well, I mean, because it's difficult to make that work.
How is it difficult to make it work? These people are actually making claims saying, if you give me your money, X will happen. They are stating that this will happen. If it doesn't happen, they are making false claims.
Well, let's just say it's nothing that the courts want.
Well, yeah, because religion gets a pass.
Yeah. And of course, a lot of these the prosperity gospel is probably one of the worst. A lot of these mega churches, even if they don't say they're prosperity gospel, they obviously are prosperity gospel. You hear it in their speeches, you hear it in their, in the way they do things. They've got generally, they've got the big wall of donors so that everybody that gave a ton of money can show how big they are. As the article says, sometimes you can't, you have to pay to do various actions in the church, like be a part of the choir.
Yeah.
It's, and it is, well, for one thing, it's a case of, stuff in the Bible, completely contradicting the Bible as if that's unusual.
Yeah, it's all pay to pray.
Yeah, well, I mean, I seem to remember Jesus going a little apeshit on people or something about
Yeah,
it.
but you don't think these people give a shit what Jesus says, do you?
No. No, they don't. I mean, and it's really funny is that these Protestant movements were based on, in the beginning, the idea that we are going to focus solely on the Bible. And in some respects, they've now become more superstitious and more, irreligious, not based on the Bible than the Catholic Church is. I mean, you have these myths growing up around them, and these churches that, handle this prosperity gospel, which has absolutely no backing anywhere. And it's unfortunate because, much like the Catholic Church, we talked about victimizing the members of their congregation. This is another form of victimization because a lot of these people cannot afford, like you said, the old lady eats cat food so she can give the money to the church that will make her happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, we need to start educating people. And I know, let's be honest, the old people are probably a lost cause because you can't reach these people anymore because they're so completely subsumed into this religious belief that, actually saying you're being lied to and cheated and tricked, they won't believe it. They're beyond help. But we need to start teaching the young to look at this stuff critically and skeptically and say, there's something seriously wrong here. We need to start training these people the same way we're training them with the Nigerian princes. You don't send these fuckers money.
Well, I mean, and also train them that look at the church. Look at what these people are doing. Do you have a church that looks like it was, the Palace of Versailles? Your money probably isn't going to good works in that case. It's like the Crystal Cathedral. This huge, monstrous, thing. I mean, I have to admit, it cost $1 bazillion and it doesn't even look good. It looks like some bad it looks like some bad Scythia original. But in all seriousness, why do you need that? Why do you need these huge places? If someone's going to a church, they should ask themselves, where does the money go? If you're continually building monuments to yourself, which is what these things really are, then obviously the money's not going to the people who need it. Obviously you're not following the doctrine of the Bible.
But these people don't care. And we know, there have been studies done that show that the ridiculous majority of all money put in that collection plate, it doesn't go to help the poor. It doesn't go towards charitable causes. It goes towards maintaining the church and it goes towards paying the pastor. It doesn't go to helping anybody but the people in the church.
Yeah, and, you have, it's unfortunate, and it is a case of, as you said, indoctrination. It's one of the reasons some of these churches are so powerful. They have money to throw around. And I think, again, that's another reason why we're seeing a decline in people going to church. People are picking up on this. Younger people are noticing this. Younger people now can access the internet and find out information like this and then ask, okay, what is going on with this church? Where is this church's money going? They look at it, they don't like what they see, and they figure, well, we'll just find somebody else to give our money to, or maybe more of it will get to the people who need it.
Yeah, well, I said, though, a lot of people are doing it because they're getting threatened, because they've been raised to think that if they don't give their money to this organization, that they're going to piss off this invisible spook in the sky. And come on, people, you're idiot.
Or, alternately, they live in a community and they don't want to be seen poorly by their community. I mean, that's another factor. A lot of these churches really benefit on peer pressure. That's another reason that the collection plate is in the middle of the service, where everybody is seeing how much you're putting into it. No one wants to be left behind, so you have people pulling out more money, not so much so that they can give what they think they should give to the church, but so that the guy next to them doesn't give more. Another sentence.
Yeah, well, it's just like in this story where they're 3 times in this service, they're making people run up to the front of the church. And these people are like leaving their shoes and their wedding rings and their jewelry and their watches, and they're just throwing their wallets because they got nothing else. If you went for a 4th one, everybody would be coming back naked because they're just leaving their clothes up there because they just get into this mindset, and there's just this mania going on where, holy shit, we gotta keep giving. And nobody is standing up going, holy fuck, what are you people doing?
Yeah. And then,
I'd like to see that. If, the second time when he's going, keep giving, give me all your money. If somebody stood up in the damn church and said, what are you doing, you asshole? I don't see you up there dumping your wallet out. What's going on? But no, nobody does that.
And, it's like, when we look at the beginning of this story, there's also a great deal of psychological conditioning around it because the way the organ's playing, he mentions the organs, this is a very clever method of manipulation. And I think that's something else people need to understand about these groups is that these are not people who have just stumbled onto something who has worked. A lot of these churches have organize this in a way that any third world dictator or minister of propaganda would be envious of.
But if you saw this kind of thing happening outside of a church setting, not only would you think it was ridiculous, but you'd probably have the police out there taking these guys away in handcuffs going, you guys are running a frickin' scam.
Yeah.
Religion is a scam, people. Figure it out.
Well, one problem is that if you look at this, if you look at, what is said also, it'd be interesting to sue a church based on their not following the Bible. The court wouldn't touch that. But, as it points out, when you, in Luke and Hebrews, then we get down to, Matthew where, Jesus said, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and the streets. Again, it's clearly that these churches are not Christian. You can't, sorry guys, I hate to say it, but 90% of these churches are the biblical literalist school. You don't get to say biblical literalist and they ignore something that Jesus supposedly said flat out. They're ignoring what are flat out, commandments in the New Testament. One of the arguments I would say to fix this is the government really needs to start nailing churches on nonprofit violation.
Yeah, but they won't.
Hello?
That's the problem. They're not going to.
No, that is a problem. That's where now hopefully as more and more people start leaving churches, because way too many of these churches, they use Hollywood accounting. They get away with honestly pulling stuff that no other nonprofit would get away with. And you need to start nailing them based on the idea that you're a nonprofit. There are limits on what you can spend and what you can make. And we're going to sit there and we're going to look at you and we're going to make certain that you prove that you're a nonprofit.
Well, the problem is that religion is treated differently in that they don't ever have to open their books for anybody for any reason. They can be doing anything that they want. The IRS has no ability to go in and audit them and say, hey, what are you doing with this money? They can't do that. And that's a massive problem. The other problem is that it is absolutely impossible, except in the most ridiculous cases, for any of these churches to actually lose their nonprofit status. They can't. It's been set up that way so that it is impossible for any religion to ever fail to maintain their status.
The closest that's come to, I think there was a case back in the 70s where Scientology temporarily lost its religious status.
Well, the problem is, and this is kind of, I don't know if it's changed, but this is how it was as of a couple of years ago, that the IRS there was such a concern that the IRS was going to go through and start auditing these churches and start forcing them to follow rules, that the IRS actually set up the system so that the only person who could make these decisions, there was one person in the IRS who could actually go through and start the proceedings to audit or test or whatever these churches. And then the IRS eliminated that position so that there was nobody who could actually do anything about it.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because this is a scam. It's a scam on the most vulnerable. Because, seriously, I don't care if you believe in religion or not. That's not my, I honestly don't care about that. What bothers me is how many of these cases are being used to take advantage of people who are psychologically vulnerable by using, very, very cynical manipulations of of the crowd and the audience.
Yeah, and like I said, if you tried to do that in any context other than religion, you'd be in jail. But religion gets away with this crap because religion gets special privileges in society that nobody else gets.
Yeah, and it's been very powerful. Let's face it, the changes we're seeing today in America and the rest of the world are almost unprecedented. We're gradually moving, religions have fallen before, but they've usually been replaced. We're moving into a period where the future culture, the religion may fall and not be replaced by any other religion. And that's unprecedented.
And it's a good thing too.
It's definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah. I'm honestly hoping that people are starting to see that this kind of crap happens. It hasn't been that long, I don't think, and it's probably been, 20 or 30 years, where we've had these just giant mega churches where there's tens of thousands of people in the pews, and they've got these giant, displays and, all this CGI magic going on and all this other stuff where it really is, it's a giant stage show for your entertainment. So you hand over all your money. I'm hoping that we're getting to the point where people are just looking at this going, all right, this is just theater. This isn't religion. This isn't anything. This is theater to extract our wallets from our pockets. And they're starting to go, we don't need this. We don't need this live theatrical event. That's not what we're here for.
Yeah. And it will be, it's going to be interesting. Yeah. One of the things that makes me think that this is going to be a big change is people start realizing that there is no more social pressure to do this. How many people do this because of social pressure?
Well, I mean, a lot of people do it. They don't really give a damn about the religion. They don't care about the service. The whole reason that they go is for socializing afterwards. You go outside, you have coffee and donuts, you talk to people, you mix, you talk about getting jobs, you talk about all kinds of stuff, and then you go home. That was the whole thing. I mean, when I was going to church way back in the day, that was the major thing, was you went out and you mixed and you socialized. Didn't really make a damn bit of difference what happened inside. Now, you don't have to do that. You can go home, hop on the internet, you can talk to 100,000 people any damn time you want. You don't need that kind of stuff anymore.
And, that is one of the things that is, again, changing things. Because also another factor is that when you see this, when you look at the internet, we start seeing more different people. I mean, let's face it, one of the powers that many religions have had is to keep their members segregated. Segregated socially, segregated physically, segregated spiritually. Now you don't have that. You have people who can now talk and see the world, and deal with as many people as they want. And that's another thing that I think has dramatically changed, the way religion is working now. They're now in a market of ideas that they didn't used to be.
And that's a positive thing. And I do think that the internet has, it's been said that the internet is where religions go to die. And I think it has, more than anything else on the planet, been responsible for the worldwide fall of religion. And we're actually starting to, and I think this is a wonderful thing, but we're actually starting to see in places like Saudi Arabia and Yemen and some of these Middle Eastern countries, we're starting to see atheism break out there too.
Right, and where it's much more dangerous to break out there. So that's obviously a real impulse. But I mean, the thing is that I don't doubt there will continue to be religious people. I mean, it is something, but what's happening is that so many people for instance, in Saudi Arabia, not being religious was not an option. Or let's rephrase, not being publicly religious was not an option. Because, the state will come down on you. In America, for many people, if you are not religious, you run into issues and problems. The community outs you. But that's not being religious because you want to be religious. That's being religious because you don't want the alternative to happen to you. And now that they're losing that power, we're seeing increasingly that many of these religions are not really able to compete in a market of ideas because they never had to.
They don't have any ideas.
Yeah, well, you get like these like creflo dollars, what does it give you? It gives you nothing. Doesn't even give you what the traditional churches gave you because you don't get any money back. You don't get any support from those religions. They're money-making machines. You're not a member of the congregation.
Exactly.
And people are beginning to realize this. And, also, hopefully as we will see it continue, as I said, I have no problem, I have good memories from my time in the Episcopalian Church. I have no problem with churches, but I have a great problem with the idea of these groups taking advantage of people and using the power they have to essentially become money-making machines. But surprise, surprise, that has its own penalty, which is people are getting wise. I mean, you and I, before the podcast began, you and I talked a little bit about how Amazon was changing their policies because people were gaming the system. Well, this is the same thing happening here. People are becoming increasingly aware of how many religions game the system. Whether it's, give or God will send you to hell, or you have to hate the gays to become a part of this religion, whatever you care it to be, people are increasingly getting wise to this, and so many churches have ended up on the wrong side of history.
I think all churches are on the wrong side of history when it comes right down to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, when you, like, for instance, the Quakers, okay, you could say the Quakers were on the right side of history because they were always against the slave. But if you look at a lot of religions we have in America, a lot of like our, especially Southern, Midwestern, these were groups that were against gay rights. Before they were against gay rights, they were against interracial marriage. Before they were against interracial marriage, they were against desegregation. They were then against I mean, a lot of these churches we're dealing with are churches that have just consistently been for the bad guys. To use the Michael and Webb thing, they were the baddies.
Yeah, but let's be honest, all of these churches still believe in imaginary friends, so ultimately, they're on the wrong side of history no matter where they go.
Yeah, and that is something that as a historian, I mean, one of the problems is I hate that, I never had any terribly bad experience with religion, but as a historian, it's hard to forget the fact that, the people we laugh at today and, go and look at their mummies in the National Museum or LA Museum did believe that they were going to go down to live with the Pharaoh, and so I can't imagine they were any dumber than we are. So you start running into a problem is that either your religion is the only one that's right, and it will only be right until it falls and some other religions along, or perhaps all.
And I'm willing to bet on the latter.
Personally, I'm becoming increasingly arguing that, whatever you believe about any existence beyond, and let's face it, nobody can say that for certain, because you can't prove a negative. I think that the state will not be harmed if religions have less of a role in public affairs, because we seriously do not need to be threatened.
Yeah, but see, that's kind of the thing. And I mean, I know, hey, I'm going to go off topic again because you just brought something else up. Ooh. But I can't tell you how many, and usually it's Christians, but it can be anybody, how many theists will come up and say, well, you can't prove my God is not real. Yeah, but we as rational people, we do not believe in things just because we can't disprove them. I can't disprove unicorns. That doesn't mean I believe in them. Rational people only believe in things that they have good reason to believe are actually so.
The problem is that there was actually a statement by Thomas Aquinas about that, which largely said, be a good person. If there is no God, you've been a good person anyway. If there's an evil God, well, you shouldn't follow him. And if there's a good God, you will, he'll be happy that you did good. But, one of the problems was saying, well, you can't prove that we don't have a God. And you're right. You cannot prove that there is not an existence past death. We can't. I mean, there is no way you can prove that. But it is somewhat easier to argue that, well, wait a minute. All these religions we have today, if you read, the religions of the Bible, if you read just about any religion around, they are chock fucking full of miracles. And I'm not talking small miracles where Janie, where a poor lady looked down and found $100. I'm talking about, Christ has risen to heaven, the tombs break open, and a few hundred dead prophets come walking in.
Which, amazingly enough, nobody else talks about.
But more importantly, we don't hear a lot of miracles anymore. And it seems odd that the miracles go away about the time when you get things like cameras and TVs and phones. In other words, about the time when you have the information technology to run there and take a quick picture to see whether or not there is a miracle. And
well, of course, because these miracles never happened. It's all mythology. It always has been. It's a bunch of people making shit up because it sounds good, and then people down the line, they read these accounts and go, holy crap, that must have happened. No, it didn't.
Well, it's like, for instance, some people I know who say, well, look at all the miracles we heard about in the medieval church. So there had to be something going on there. And then I say, well, what about the dinosaurs and the fire-breathing dragons Herodotus talked about in Africa? Oh, well, those were just, and no, it doesn't work that way, guys. There is no more legitimacy to the writings of the medieval saints.
Yeah, and you got Christians going, well, I don't believe that Muhammad rode off to heaven on a winged horse. How is that any sillier than the stupid shit you believe?
Right, so you run into the problem of, as I said, it is possible to say, and reasonable to say, you can't prove that there is no existence beyond our material existence. We don't know. Some scientists say that there could be weird stuff. But, on the other hand, that's not an argument for Christianity. That's not an argument for, Islam. That's not an argument for Buddhism. That's simply an argument saying that there may be something we don't know, a non-physical component, which has nothing at all to do with any of the religions on earth today. Because if you're arguing for Christianity, what you're really saying is not that, okay, well, there may be some existence beyond our physical norms. What you're arguing is that, the Son of God came down to earth, preached, died, went to hell for 3 days, was resurrected, and stands with the angels. For Muhammad, he rode off on a horse. If you're Mormon, the founder of the Mormon Church, scribed the sacred tablets brought down to him by the angel. I mean, you're talking about specific events that you claim were historical events that actually happened, and yet we have precious little records.
Yeah, I mean, these people are going, well, you can't prove us wrong. I don't have to prove you wrong. You have to prove you right, and you failed in that utterly.
Well, and this is an issue because and it becomes an issue, and especially like, for instance, just if you look at some of the stories, because another factor is I think one thing that's hurt religion is our increasing acceptance of the idea of universal human rights. I mean, that's why if anyone saw that rather wonky Noah's Ark film that just was out recently, the one with like the 6-armed angels, all that stuff, not only was it more wonky pulpish than actually biblical, but they spent like half the damn show largely trying to show that everybody on earth except for Noah's family had become a bunch of inbred cannibals. Why? Because, oh yeah, I'm going to drown every man, woman, child, and newly born baby on the planet because I just had a hissy fit over that they're not being nice. It
yeah,
doesn't fly in
exactly.
today's society. You get to the question then, well, wait a minute, Hitler had problems with the Jews, so why does God get
I don't know, God makes Hitler look like a piker.
Well, yeah, I mean, and so, like, just to kind of get back to the original thing, I'm not saying that there cannot be an existence, some kind of, I won't call it supernatural, because by definition, if it exists in this world, it is natural. I won't say that there isn't, because you can never say that there isn't. But that has nothing to do with whether or not existing religions today have any backing in the historical record. We know they exist, but there's no evidence of any of their miracles. And if you're arguing that, hey, natural law was completely overturned when this guy did this, the burden is on you to kind of find some evidence. And you want to know something? If there's one thing the Romans liked to do, it was keep records. The Romans wrote about Vesuvius. I am fairly certain that had 100 dead guys come walking into Jerusalem, Pontius Pilate would have felt the need to, write a letter to, the Emperor Trajan and go, do we count them?
What do we do about the zombie apocalypse?
Do they pay taxes? Yeah, the zombie apocalypse has happened in Jerusalem. Dear Emperor Trajan, what the hell am I supposed to do? But yet we don't have any of that. We have some things from that time period. We have some evidence that Pilate existed. They found like a monument to him in one of the aqueducts. But other than that, we have nothing more than the idea that around this time, a sect of Judaism arose that the Romans simply considered weird Jews for about the next 100 years. And then, that's it. No sudden explosion, no sudden, miracles in the thing. Just, hey, yeah, I'm getting a problem. I got these wonky Christians who say they're Christians. They and the Jews are rioting in the streets. What the hell do I do? Because we're supposed to.
Yeah, and you've got modern day Christian apologists trying to say, see, that proves Jesus was real. No, it just proves a bunch of people who believed in Jesus was real. Doesn't prove anything about the actual guy.
Right. Right. So, and this is one problem, and to be honest, this is a problem you have a lot in college. There are people in college, God, I feel sorry for some of the people teaching early history like this. They do not handle well finding out that the Bible's not considered a historical source. Well, I mean, it's considered a secondary source, but it's not considered either a primary or an unattackable source. But yeah, I mean, this is just the thing of, believe what you want, but understand that there's precious little evidence.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop people today from pretending that it's all something magical and special and then holding out their hand and going, give me all your money because I want it.
Well, yeah, and that is a very big problem because that again gets to a tragedy. To be honest, sometimes I laugh at this stuff, but when we do think of the lady giving most of her money because she's old, her children are left the house, and this guy is pretending to be her best friend, so she's doing this to save her soul from destruction, doesn't make me laugh. It makes me pissed off, actually. Because, that's, I've occasionally joked that, if you want to find the biggest atheist on the planet, find some of these prosperity gospel guys, because I wouldn't even dream of doing that if I had any belief that there might be a real God.
It's one of those things that you kind of hope that there is, so these guys get what's coming to them.
Well, let's be honest. That is a huge draw for religion. I mean, even myself, because it is nice to believe that the son of a bitch who, advanced and became rich on the bones of all the kids he worked to death and died a pillar of his community because he was sufficiently rich, he managed to scrub all the information from the record, is going to get his. Flip side, as some people have pointed out, that sometimes makes it easier to not do anything because you're just saying, he'll get his after he dies. So, but
yeah. Well, we should probably wrap it up.
Yes, let us wrap it up before we find another thing to go off topic on.
Well, that was that. Yeah. Please let us know what you thought. We want your comments and questions and concerns posted on our website. We want you to tell people about us on Facebook and Twitter and Google+. We want you to write 5-star reviews of the show on iTunes and Stitcher Radio. And we want you to stay around for our next show coming out in a mere 7 days. So everybody, take care of yourselves and think logically and critically. Somebody has to, don't they?
That's true.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Bitchspot Report podcast. We invite listeners to interact with the show by commenting on our website at report.jdragononline.com. We can also be found on most social media sites including Facebook, Google+, Tumblr, and Twitter. You can also listen on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Player FM, as well as on the aforementioned website. New episodes post every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Those interested in being on the air, please visit our website. All instructions are there. We appreciate our listeners and supporters. We couldn't do this without you.